Hi there! Today I want to show you how to build an arm with deformers and also with a sleeve in Toon Boom Harmony. So let me show you what I have made already in this rig, just to show you what I have achieved and what I'm going to be replacing. So far, by default, I usually like to have my arm so that when I rotate the forearm, I'm going to have a little crease by default that shows up. I also like to build arms so that I have a few different options. So if I were to select this upper arm here, I've got this arm where I can use deformers to adjust it. It doesn't have a separate forearm piece. And I would also like to have an arm where I just have a center deformer with just 2 points, so I could treat it like a spaghetti arm or a rope arm to easily bend it around. And I want to show you the other reason that I wanted to rebuild this arm. So if you're to select all of the pegs in the arm and press R, you'll see that when I reset everything it looks kind of funky, and I want it to be that when I press reset the arm looks a little bit more like this other arm over here. But you can see that if I were to press reset on everything it would get messed up too because it's cloned. So I am actually going to delete this arm and I'm going to start from scratch and show you how I would build this arm. So here I am in my rig. I'm going to delete that group and I am going to import my reference image. So import image, browse. When I'm importing an image, I'm in Windows and I like to just navigate in Windows to the file path. And then when you click in the Explorer window, you can just copy when that blue highlight shows up, and then you can paste that file path here in Harmony's import dialog, press open. I want to create a layer based on file name, keep as original bitmap, project resolution, that all looks good. Press OK. It looks giant, and it's not always clear where it goes to here in the node view, but it always comes in at the bottom in the timeline. So I'm going to select that and I'm going to center on selection. It helps me go find where it imported it to. I'm going to bring that over and I'm actually going to put it in front of my rig, and right now it's not showing up in front of it, so what I will do is I will open up the layer properties, and with the z-axis property I'm going to type 0.1 and that brings it in front. And I'm also going to choose in the layer properties advanced opacity. I'm going to turn it down to 50%. Okay, I'm using my animate off mode and transform, and I am using Control Shift and middle mouse to scale this down. I'm looking at the feet. I know that the collar is in the right place. I changed the position of the face just a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and name this layer arm reference. And I'm going to lock it. So now when I click on the rig, it's not going to click on that image. I'm also going to turn up the quality. This is called the bitmap image quality. If you press Control Q, or there's usually a button up here in the camera view, crank that up and press OK, and the quality of the image should be higher than it was before. What I'm going to do at the beginning is I'm just going to have one arm layer. I'm going to just call this the upper arm layer. I pressed Control R to bring up that Add Drawing Layer dialog. I'm going to plug this into the composite. I'm going to give it a peg, Control Shift P. Plug it in so that it will be in respect to the rest of the rig in the right spot. So now I've got my layer that I want to draw on. I'm going to use my pencil tool. On arms, it is commonly better to go ahead and do them with a consistent line weight instead of with a variable line weight. So maybe I'll just use my line tool instead of drawing it. To see things a little bit better, I'm going to enable my light table and current drawing on top. I'm going to go back to the arm reference and I'm going to turn the opacity to 100% because I want to be able to see this pretty well as I'm tracing it. Get the line tool. Now what I want to do here is I actually want to put everything straight. When you're using deformers, it is common to have curves, but if you want to curve the arm one direction or the other direction, it's best if you start straight. Otherwise you'll get some little fractally breaking looking pieces. So I'm going to select both of these pieces with Alt-S, the select tool. I'm going to use this button. It's called Merge Pencil Lines. I set a shortcut for myself, Alt-J. I just think join lines. Alright, let's see if it put them together. It looks like it did. Okay, and now I need a cuff, and I'm going to draw it a little bit bigger than what it needs to be. And I'm going to go straight, Alt-S, Alt-J to join or merge pencil lines. And then with the hand, I actually do like to draw the hand with line tapering. So I've got a custom line weight here that I'm using. I'm using my stylus for this part. And I like to overshoot my lines. I'll show you why in a second. I'm going to use the cutter tool, and it trims that right off, which is great. And then I want to join those, Alt-J. I'm going to use my pencil width editor to get rid of this junk. Here, I'm going to go into the drawing view so it's a little bit easier for you to see what's going on here. I'm going to select all of these width points and delete them. And I go to my contour editor, the white selector tool, straighten that out. Okay. Contour editor, cutter tool. I'm rotating the screen by pressing Alt and Control at the same time. I do that a lot. So now what I want to do is I want to use some ellipses to put some circles so I know exactly where I need the pivot points to be. I make a swatch and I call it invisible, and I just turn the alpha way down so it's transparent. For now I'm going to go ahead and leave it so that I can see it. It's partially visible. It's not totally transparent. I'm going to hit Alt equals, which is my ellipse tool. Hold Shift so I can draw a perfect ellipse. And right now I have it set to fill at each shape that I draw. I don't want that. I want this pivot point to be directly in the center between the hand and the shoulder. So anatomically, when you're drawing, you always want to make sure that the elbow is centered between those. Or at least that's how I usually like to do it. So I'm just going to make a little mark. So here again what I'm trying to do is I just want to make sure that I'm in the dead center between these. So one way to do that is I like to just draw a straight line, copy, paste, move it, scoot it over, see how well I did at estimating where that center is. So it looks like I actually want the center to be right there. I've got that ellipse centered in the right spot. Just want to zoom in and make sure that I'm good. I'm going to press K to show my strokes. And as you can see, there are little circles that show up when you're overlapping, which is nice. That's the center. Cool. And then I am going to copy that and paste it, bring it up here, zoom in, hold Shift and Alt on a PC as I scale this down about the center. It's looking good. If this arm did not have sleeves, I would probably set another, copy another ellipse and bring it down here for where the rotation of the hand happens. But I'm not going to worry about it on this one. Now what I want to do is I'm going to make a few other layers. I'm going to go full screen, Control F twice to get into this mode. I'm going to scoot that over. And I'm actually just going to give myself a bunch of space here so I can just work very easily, and then I'll probably end up grouping the arm later. Control R, forearm, add, hand, add, and let's go cuff, and cuff, add and close. Now these new drawings usually show up in the last place that you left clicked in your node view. Now I'm going to spread them apart because I know that I need some space. I often like to have the hand on the left, the upper arm on the right. I'm going to select all of these, press Ctrl H, adds them all to a composite, plug that in here, delete the composite. It's just a quick shortcut to plug them all in. I'm going to select all these and press Ctrl Shift P, which adds a peg with all of the right names to each of those. I'm going to select the upper arm and the forearm pegs and press Ctrl Shift P because I want to have a parent peg on each of those. Move those up. To slide this into the cable, you hold Alt, slides it in, and I want the upper arm, I'm going to rename this to be upper arm MP, meaning master peg, and then I'm going to have this one be the forearm master peg. I want the forearm, whenever I move the master peg, I want it to move the hand. When I move the upper arm master peg, I want it to move the forearm, and I'll show you a demo of why I do this later. The cuff, I think I might actually want to plug it in right here, but we'll see. I'll test it out, see if that's what I want in the end. Okay, so here I am. I've got the hand drawn. I'm going to press Ctrl X to cut it, go to the hand and paste it. I'm going to go to the upper arm. I'm going to cut the sleeve off, the cuff rather. And then here on the upper arm, I'm actually just going to copy the whole thing to the forearm. And now what I'm going to do, I'm on the forearm and I have the cutter tool, and I'm going to trim those off. Because the lines overlapped, it trimmed it for me the way I wanted it to. Now I'm going to use the pencil line editor, the pencil editor here, and I can drag that up so that it's looking a little bit better. I'm still going to edit it in a second, but for right now what I want to show you is I want to save the positions of these articulation, circular bending points of the arm. I'm going to select this circle that I've drawn, and I'm going to go to the overlay layer and paste it. I just want to save it for later in case I need to get back to it. And then I'm going to push copy and paste again. Now you'll notice that whenever you copy and paste on the same layer, it offsets it. To counter that, press Shift and then up and left. It'll put it in the exact center of where you want it to be. And now I'm going to press Shift and Alt, and I am going to scale it down so it's very small. And then I'm going to select that center one, and I am going to make the maximum size in the tool properties something a lot smaller. I don't want it to be 0. Let's do 0.5. That'll probably work nicely. Now this is just to help me in the future so that I can tell where to put the pivot point when I'm rigging it together with the pegs and stuff. Alright, so I'm good on the forearm. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete the rest of this junk on there. Okay, now I'm going to use my cutter and I'm going to trim that piece out. And now I am going to select all of this. I'm going to turn it all to the line color that I have, and then I'm going to merge the pencil lines, or Alt-J. So now it's a perfect shape. I am going to paint bucket the shirt color in there. I'm going to cut it off of here on the line art, go to the color art, and paste it. Alright, so the overlay's got the articulation circle in the pivot area, and then the line art has the lines, and the color art has the color. I'm going to do the same thing for the upper arm. Actually, I know that I am going to want another copy of this full arm later, so I'm actually going to duplicate this drawing I did. So I've got a duplicate. I've got a drawing number 1 and a drawing number 2. And go back to drawing number 1. Okay. I'm going to trim that with the cutter tool. I'm going to copy both of these circles, holding Shift, copy, paste them on the overlay, copy and paste them again, press Shift up, Shift left, and then I am going to select this, hold Shift and Alt, it scales down about the center, select the line, go to the maximum size, I'll type in 0.5, and I will select this with the black selector tool, hold Shift and Alt, take that down to 0.5 also. I'm going to use the cutter, I'm going to cut out the extra stuff that I don't need. And now I'm going to select it all and turn it all to matte line color. I think I actually don't want that there. And I think I'm actually going to add some tapering. So I'm using the pencil editor. I set mine as a shortcut of Alt-W, and then I'm going to hold Control to add some extra points here, and then I'm going to hold Shift, which allows me to drag from both sides of the line at the same time. If I don't hold Shift, it's just one side at a time. When you're rigging, you test a lot of stuff, and you troubleshoot it later. Yeah, it looks a little weird, doesn't it? That looks better. I think I'm actually going to just do that. Okay. I'm going to join the lines down here, merge pencil lines. Alright, cool. As long as this width is the same as the forearm, we'll be good. I'm going to come back out in the camera view, and I am actually going to turn this back to 50% transparent, the arm reference. In the Advanced tab, tool, the layer properties. First with the cuff, and I'm going to use Alt-V. This is the stroke tool. It just does a 0 width stroke. I'm going to use Alt-Y to paint unpainted. I'm going to cut that and paste it onto the color art. And then make sure the hand, we want to paint the skin color in there. And then I'm going to press Control-Shift-A, which selects everything of the current swatch I have selected. Cut it, paste it, and I'm going to press Control-Shift-F. That flattens and removes extra strokes. I am going to temporarily disable the reference, and I'm going to put a backdrop around it. Now, to insert a backdrop, you go up here and you choose Insert Backdrop, and I set my shortcut key to Insert, and that just makes sense to me. We'll be doing more of that later and soon, and I'm just going to name this Arm Reference. Alright, so here I am in the camera. I can see the arm. It looks pretty terrible. Don't worry. I don't want to be in peg selection mode. I want to select the drawing. Okay, it looks like I still need to color that in. So I'm going to use the stroke tool. I'm going to press K so I can see the strokes. Paint that in, cut it, paste it on the color art. Why do you do that all the time? Some people like to keep all the lines on the line art so that you can do compositing later, so you can put all of the lighting effects like glows and rim lights and stuff on the color art. And so if you have it all separated like that, it makes compositing a lot easier if the lines are all on the line art. So as you can see, we probably want to plug the cuff in below the forearm, so to the right. And then I want the hand to also be behind that. The next thing I want to do is I want to set the pivot positions so that the arm will rotate the way that I would expect it to. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the hand, press Alt-3. That brings up my, this is called the Advanced Animation panel. It brings up the Rotate tool. And by default, the pivot position is in the center of the screen every time you make a new peg or drawing. So I am going to move that for the hand to a place that makes sense, where I think it would rotate from. Looks good to me. And now for the cuff. For right now, I'm just going to turn that forearm off so I can see what's going on here. Press Alt-3, bring this down, enable the forearm, A is the default shortcut, and let's see, that looks like a good place for it to rotate from. I might want to bring it down even a little bit lower though. Okay. That's good, especially for skew. Next up, forearm. So what's great is you can either choose one peg at a time, or you can just select all the pegs and drawings you want to set a pivot position on all at once. And now you drag it down, and this is where that little center circle comes in handy. You put it in the perfect place for the forearm to rotate from. And we'll do the same thing for the upper arm. I'm going to press Control-Y, which will add a display. I'm going to choose from my display drop-down, display 2. So now all I'm seeing is the stuff that's plugged into that composite. So make it a lot easier for me to put that pivot in the right place because nothing's blocking it. And now, sometimes it gets a little weird. Oh, that's because I wasn't supposed to set that pivot on all of those. That's both of the arms together. I didn't mean to adjust that one. Just wanted to adjust these. Test it. Great. So now we're done needing to see the invisible stuff. So I am going to double click my invisible swatch and put the alpha at 0 so it's a little easier to see what's going on. Alright, next thing is we don't want to see this black line. So now is when we're going to dive into the node library and we'll deal with a bunch of isolate layers. I am now going to spread these quite far apart from each other, so I have plenty of room to do what I need to do next. It's often helpful to just keep pegs and drawings that all have the same pivot information so that they're vertically lined up with each other. It makes it kind of easy to remember which ones have the same pivot information. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to my node library and I'm going to go to the filter isolate section. And I am going to bring in a whole bunch of nodes. I'm going to bring in my overlay layer, I'm going to bring in line art, color art, underlay, auto patch, and layer selector. These take up, the titles of these are too long for me. I want to call it OL for overlay. I'm just going to abbreviate everything. Now I use these so much that I actually like to just save a set of these for myself to use for later. What I do is I will just select them all, push insert, I'll insert a backdrop, and I would call this my layers toolbox. And then I would copy that, and I would go to my library, and I would go to my Toon Boom library on my computer, and I would go to my helpers area. I've set this up myself. Right to modify, you right click so that you can save things here, and then you can just paste it in and then title it the way that you need to. We'll call it Art Layers Toolbox. So now what we're going to do is we want to have these available for us. I'm just going to go full screen so it's easier to see what's going on. I know the upper arm, I want the line art, color art, and auto patch. So we're going to select all those holding control. Now I'll copy and paste. And eventually I'm going to be putting a prefix on everything. So it's going to say MAT underscore upper arm, MAT underscore CA underscore 1. So I want to leave a little bit of room in between all of this stuff. Now I'm going to select all these three and paste those here on forearm. For the hand, I'm actually going to copy all of those except for the layer selector. Put them all under the hand because I like to have layered hands so I can put some pieces of the hand in front of others for fists and holding objects and stuff. And then the cuff, I imagine we're probably going to want line art and color art. We'll see. I'm not sure yet. And now we want to hook everything up, and there's this nice tool called the cable cutter. We could use that to cut these and then hook all these up, but I'm actually going to show you a different way. Alright, I'm going to hold the color art, I'm going to press Alt, slide it into the cable, and I'm going to press Control H to add a composite, and then I'm going to hold Alt to slide it in underneath there. And then I'm going to put the line art here so it's in front. Anything on the left is in front. And I'm going to do the same kind of thing for each of the other pieces. Again, Control H to add the composite. I might end up deleting some of these later, but for now I'm just going to do this. Okay, here's another trick. When you have to hook something up to a lot of things, you can also hold Control and then click on the bottom port of an element, and then just click on any part of the elements below that you want to connect it to. Okay. And remember, I put a display down here, display number 2, and that'll be nice because we can just focus on working on the arm. We don't have to see the whole rig right now. So here's what we want to do. We don't want to see the black line on the elbow on the forearm. We want to cut that line art. And we want to cut it with the color stuff up here from the upper arm. I'm using Harmony 20. You can press enter and then just type what node you want. So I'm going to type cutter, press enter. You could also find that in your node library by just typing cutter, and you could drag it in from here. So I'm going to hold Alt to drag it in underneath the line art here. And then I am going to drag the color art to cut it. Wow. Well, that looks messed up, right? Let me show you what's going on. Right now, it's saying that we want the color art to cut that. I'm going to move this display so you can see what's going on. I'm going to hold Alt, and it is going to show me the color art there of the upper arm. Now notice, when the line art goes to here, the color art goes to the center of the line art. It doesn't stop at the black. It goes to the middle of the black. And so that's why we're having this issue to where it's cutting kind of a big chunk out of there that we don't want. So instead what we want to use is we want to use the auto patch. Let me show you the difference of what the auto patch is. I'll just cycle through all of them again for you so you can see. Get the line art, color art goes to the center of the black line, and then the auto patch. You'll notice it's thinner. What it's doing is it's taking whatever is on the line art and it's subtracting it away from the color art. So this is actually what we want to be using to cut the lines on the forearm. So I'm just going to drag that over here, and now let's hold Alt, drag that display back underneath, and okay, that looks right. That's what we want. And now if it rotates, it's behaving nicely. And what if we press Alt up? Now I always think of this as Alt, push it away from me. This is Z depth, Z depth nudge ordering. Okay, you can see that we also need the upper arm to get cut by the auto patch of the forearm. Maybe pause that for a second, chew it over. I know this is a lot of technical stuff, but the more times you do it, the easier it will get. So I'm going to go full screen here. I'm going to copy this cutter, and I'm going to slide it into the line art of the upper arm, and then I'm going to use the auto patch of the forearm to cut it. So now let's test it. Move it over. Okay, it's working good. Push it back, it's still working good. Great! So now I want to show you how to add a little bit of a crease to that elbow. We're actually going to want some overlay layers. So I am going to go full screen, and I'm going to give myself even just a little bit more space. Copy the overlay layer, paste it here, plug it in, plug it in down here right in front of the line art. I'm just going to move that down so it's easier to see what's going on. Don't like to have cables crisscrossing all over the place. It gets a little confusing. Copy and paste that overlay. Again, I'll just scoot that over so it's more clear what's happening. Line those all up. Looks nice and organized. And now what we want to do is we want to add the crease. I'm going to click on the forearm. I'm going to go to the drawing view. Use the cutter. Alt-T is the shortcut. Sorry, I don't have it here in my toolbar for you to see it, but I customized my toolbar. You can do that by going to Preferences, and you choose Flat Tool Toolbar, and then you have to restart, and then you can choose which tools you want to have in your toolbar. And on the PC, there's a little bit of a glitch. You can't right-click here when it's docked in your drawing or camera window. You have to make your tools toolbar come up here to the main, and then you can customize it by right-clicking, and then you can choose to add and subtract things from your toolbar. I'm going to go ahead and add the cutter just so that you can see it in this tutorial when I'm using it. Move it up. OK. And then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to right click and choose Tools, and then I'm going to dock it back to this side. I'm going to use the cutter, copy this much of the arm, and paste it up here. And then I'm going to use my pencil width editor tool. And as you can see, you're seeing this invisible circle that's here, right? And that's because the matte invisible stroke color is totally invisible. That backup circle is still there. I'm going to drag, let me show you a little closer what I'm doing. So with the center editor tool, you can drag the end of your straight cut line to make it so it's tapered and circular. And so this is the overlay art layer. So as you can see, the way that this is built, the overlay art layer is going to be sitting in front of the line art layer. And so with the line art, you've got the full black, but this part is getting cut by the upper arm color stuff. But here on the overlay, we just have where we want the crease to show up. And this looks just a little off to me. Sometimes what I do is I cut that invisible circle so that I can adjust this a little bit more how I want it to be. Delete that, scoot that down, and then paste that invisible circle back in case I need it sometime. So now let's go back to the camera and see what we have been able to do. With the forearm, I am now going to rotate it, and you'll see, hey, got a freebie little crease there. Nice. It's a little chunky. Maybe I want to thin it down a little bit more. If you push the down arrow keys, you can make this happen. Well, that looks weird. Maybe here what we'll do instead is we will just taper one side of the line. I think that that'll look okay. So now when I go ahead and rotate it, I have that. Maybe I want to adjust this side too, depending on which way the arm is. Looks pretty good. And then I just want to reset the forearm rotation here, so it goes back to default. Great. So now what I want to show you is if you were to rotate it and then if you were to push it back, you'll see that we don't have a crease on the upper arm. So we're going to do the same process so that the upper arm can have a crease for when it's in front of the forearm. I'm going to press undo to get back to this point. I'm going to click on the upper arm. I'm going to go to the drawing view, press Shift X or Shift M to reset your view. I'm going to get my cutter tool, copy that to the overlay, use the pencil width editor or the pencil editor tool. Okay, I'm going to press Alt forward to push it back behind. So that looks messed up, huh? I'm going to press undo a few times. Come back to the drawing view. Those are both the same size. I'm going to come in the camera view, rotate this, push it back, Alt forward, and then I will adjust this. That looks better. I'm cool with that. I'm going to do the same thing over on this side. So let's rotate the forearm over to that side. Yeah, I like it. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to reset the that's the upper arm. And then I'm just going to reset everything. Press R. What we're doing when we press R is right now you can see this is the coordinate toolbar up here. I like to always have this visible, especially when I'm animating. You can see that the properties on this arm right now is that it's 0.0001 back and it is rotated at an 81-degree angle. And so when you press R, it sets everything back to zeros and ones. The scale is 1. Position is 0. Sometimes we want to have deformers on these arms so that we can get some nice custom shapes. So I will show you how I would like to add some deformers to what I have here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the cuff. I'm going to center on selection here, and I'm going to solo the cuff. So all I see is the cuff. And I am going to click on my deform tool. I'm going to press this plus to add a deformation group, and then in the tool properties I'm going to choose this, the envelope mode, and then I am going to put the points that I want, press hold Alt so that it connects, and I'm going to hold Alt to break those so that they are corner deformers instead of smooth deformers. And you kind of want to drag these Bezier curves so that they're in the middle. You don't want to keep it super tiny like that. You want it to be able to have more influence over the art. Straighten it all up. Now I'm going to use my transform, Shift T, and my animate current frame and see how that's working. Okay, now you can see that it looks kind of junky, right? I'm going to turn my shirt color to something that is different so that you can see the color a little bit easier. Okay, bright green. Yeah, I think you can see that now. You see how it's getting kind of like fractally and straight and weird looking. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to go and I'm going to add some more geometry so that Harmony can deform a little bit better. So here I am on the cuff layer, and I am in the contour editor tool, and I am going to press Control, which brings in this little plus so that I can add some more geometry points to the line. This will make it so that Harmony can deform the art better. You see how that looks a lot more smooth? Now you can see that the green, the fill color, doesn't look better yet. So let me show you how to fix that. Now when we go into drawing tools like the select tool, the contour editor, brush, pencil, it actually kind of disables the deformer temporarily until we go back into animation mode. Then you can see how the deformers are changing the art. What I'm going to do now, draw using the stroke tool, so it's going to make a 0 width stroke, and I'm just going to refill, paint bucket this in again. I'm going to cut the color, come here to the color art. Now before I paste it, I'm going to show you what was here before. You see how there's just like 4 points, 5 points. So the color art didn't have enough geometry to smoothly deform. So I'm going to select all that, press delete, and now I'm going to paste the new stuff, and you'll see that the new stuff inherited all of those geometry points that I had given to the line art. And when I paint bucketed it, it inherited all that stuff. Okay, so now let's take a look. That's a lot more smooth. Now you can see how it doesn't deform perfectly. There's a little bit of junk there, but as long as we start with the geometry pretty well straight, we can go either way that we want to, concave or convex. Fun, complicated math words, right? And it works. But if we had built the cuff so that it had started like this and we put a deformer on it like this, it would be very hard to invert it and go the other direction. There would be a bunch of breaking happening. Also, if you pull these out a little bit, it usually will help. You start to see things break when things get pinched. Okay, now you can just select the deformation group and press this button. It's reset current keyframe, and it just sets it all back to where it was when you created it. So there we go, we've done the cuff. Now we want to go ahead and add deformers to the other pieces. Before we leave the cuff, let's make sure to go and turn that the right color, the shirt color. Now for the forearm, oh yeah, we were solo on the cuff. Let's unsolo the cuff, and then let's solo the forearm. Center on selection, solo, and sometimes what I like to do is I even like to click on the outline mode, which is this little square, so I can tell exactly where those deformers need to be. Click on the drawing layer, click on the hammer, the deform tool, press plus, and start. I've got the envelope mode selected, and I am going to start adding some points. Hold Alt to complete that. Hold Alt to break that. I think a good rule here is to try to make your Bezier take up about 1/3 of the length of a straight line. I would say it's a good rule to use no more than 4 points if you can. The less deform points you have to mess around with when you're animating, the better. Now I'm going to uncheck outline mode, uncheck solo mode, And before I forget, I'm going to go into the drawing of this forearm, and I'm going to do the same thing I had done with the cuff, and that is I'm just going to add a bunch of points holding control and left clicking on the art so that the deformers have more geometry to deal with. And then I'm going to paint that again because I want the color art to have more deformation points. Delete the old stuff, paste the new stuff, use the contour editor. You can see how there are more points available. While I'm doing this, I'm just going to click on the upper arm and do the same thing. Line art. Another benefit to adding all of these points is that we will be able to get elbows that look like corners later on, which is a great thing. Okay, back to the camera view. I'm not on solo mode anymore. I want to go to the upper arm, center on selection in the timeline, solo, click on this guy, click on plus, I'm going to go full screen. When you're putting deform points on unfinished lines, you want to put them just past the end of the line. This is kind of overlapping where the forearm stuff is. If you accidentally do that, you gotta go click on the last deformer point that you had before placing the next one. I want to put this just past the end and then hold Alt to complete that shape. Now, something to know is it gets a little confusing sometimes when you have two sets of deformers right on top of each other. Just try to make them a little bit different somehow. That's what I like to do. I think if I make these handlebars longer, the Béziers, that'll help me to remember that these belong to the upper arm, and the other ones belong to the lower arm. Because I will indeed be using them. I'll put those on the outside, and then this smaller guy on the inside. Yeah, I just want a little bit of a difference there. And now that I've created this one, I think I'm going to go back and adjust the forearm just a little bit with the same logic. I want to have them just a little bit different from each other. So I need to turn off solo mode for the upper arm, and turn on solo mode for the forearm, and then I will go ahead and move these to something more appropriate. Now I want these to be longer here on the forearm so that I know that they belong to the forearm. Yeah. And then I need to remember to turn off solo mode. Okay, now let me show you what we can do with this arm. Deformer arms with envelope deformers are pretty awesome. I'm going to go and I'm going to rotate this, and then I'm going to show you that, let's say that we weren't showing deformers yet. I click on this, and I press Show Deformers, which is this button. I have a shortcut key for it. And then you can see that if we move this, we can change where that is showing up. We can also hold Alt to break this to get kind of a pointier elbow so that you can get pointy elbows. I'll show my deformers, bring this down, hold Alt, drag. You can get pointy elbows, you can get smooth elbows, you can get anything when you build arms with the deformers this way. And then if you wanted to reset everything, you could just select all of your arm stuff, press R, and then to reset the deformers, you just click on this button, Reset Current Keyframe, and that will work as long as these deformer groups are selected. Okay, this next part I want to do is I want to show you how to add the back of the cuff. I am going to create a new drawing layer, Control R. I'm going to say cuff back, just BK, add and close, and I'm going to plug that in here. I'm going to add a peg, Control Shift P, and I'm going to plug it in directly underneath the other cuff peg, because whenever this cuff moves, I want it to move also. I don't want to see the back hanging around behind. I want it to stay out of the way for the most part. What I'm going to do is I am going to go to the cuff back layer, and I'm going to press Alt equals, and that is going to let me draw with the ellipse tool. And I am going to draw an ellipse, and I want to make sure that it is sitting behind the cuff that I have there. Okay. Now I can change these properties on my light table. I'm going to have it so it's not washing things out quite so bad. There, that's easier to see what's going on. I'm going to put it out right here. Eventually, this will be sitting behind the cuff. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint it with a color. So I've got matte shirt. I might as well make another swatch. Matte shirt dark. Just make it a little bit darker. Paint it Alt-Y. And now it's sitting behind there. If I were to move the stuff with deformers, I would be able to drag this down so I could see that. But as you can see, it'll be nice if we add deformers to this ellipse also. I'm going to press undo. I'm going to select the cuff back. I'm going to solo this thing. I'm going to go ahead and show the outline mode. I'm going to click on the drawing in the node view, click on the hammer, the deformation tool, on envelope mode. And I always put the starting point in the place that I don't want to move around as much, so I don't imagine myself touching the deform point up there at the top very much, because the starting deformation point is always pointed. It's not smooth. And then I'm going to test it. I'm going to turn off outline mode. Cool. Yeah, that looks good. And it can squeeze down. Great. In practice, what you would do if you didn't have anything showing, you would select the cuff, show deformers, and then you would move this, and then you could bring this down. As you can see, this also looks like we need to make a wrist. So let's do that next. Now, as we can see, the cuff, we probably want the cuff to be behind the hand. I'm just going to add another composite here. I am going to put this in front and this in back. Yes, that's the layering that I want. And now I need to add a wrist. So let's make room for the wrist. Going to scoot everything over. And I want to show you what I prefer to do. I like to make backdrops so it's really easy for me to see what's going on. I'm going to make this one the hand. I'm going to make it pink. Okay. Next up, we are going to make a wrist. Control R, wrist. I'm going to put it behind the hand. Add a peg, Control Shift P. I'm going to plug this in here. I'm probably going to end up making another peg above this, but just plugging it in for now while I work. Okay, for our wrist, let's go ahead and just use the line tool and do the same thing we were doing earlier. I'm going to add stroke, and then I'm going to color it with the skin color. Cut, paste. Okay, so now what do we want to do? We could just Alt drag it forward, and it does this, so that's nice. I'm glad to know that I have that ability. I think for the most part, if I'm going to draw all my hands with a closed line, I think I actually want the auto patch of the wrist to cut the line of the hand. I'm going to copy a cutter, paste it under the line art of the hand, and then I'm going to take the auto patch of the wrist. So as you can see, I'm going to need to break things down a little bit so I can filter out the auto patch. I'm going to go full screen so I can see what's happening a little easier. I can focus. I am going to copy the auto patch and the layer selector and paste them here under the wrist. I'm going to drag the layer selector in. Let me show you what the layer selector does. The layer selector will allow you to filter as many of the 4 sublayers as you want. So by default, when you bring in a layer selector, it has line art and color art selected, and that's actually what I want. I want the line art for the lines of the wrist, the color art for the color of the wrist. Then I'm going to make the auto patch cut the line art of the hand. I'm going to go ahead and add a deformer to the wrist. So again, it's easy if we just solo this thing first, and then I'm going to make this one really super simple. Let me show you the behavior of the curve deformer first. If I were to use the curve deformer and put 2 points, and now I'm going to animate it, this works great, but if I move this, it moves the whole thing. I don't like that behavior. So instead of using the curve deformer, I'm going to use an open-ended envelope deformer. I like the behavior of that a lot better. I'll show you why. So now I'm testing it out. That's nice. And this is nice. That's what I like. Alright, so I've got deformers on all that stuff. I'm not going to add deformers to the hand. I'm going to have so many different hands that it's usually not a good idea to add deformers to them, and the positions are going to be so different each time. Now that we have the wrist, let's go ahead and set the rotation point, the pivot point. Press Alt-3, drag it down to where it ought to be, and I think that we need to set the pivot point on the back cuff as well. I'm going to go ahead and reset these deformers, reset any movement. Now I want to set the pivot point, Alt-3, drag it from the center of the screen. Need to make sure to unsolo the cuff, and I'm going to go ahead and return the cuff to its original position, reset all the deformers. Okay. Right now, if I were to rotate that, that kind of does behave the way I want. You see how I parented everything directly underneath the forearm peg. If I'm ever to grab the forearm, it will all move. Also with the forearm, if I were to scale it all down, it would all scale down, but I can imagine a time when I might want them to scale separately. I want to go ahead and add an additional peg. I will call this forearm cuff -MP, just master peg. It's bundling things together. And then I will go ahead and attach this to those. Just give me a little bit more freedom to animate the way I want. I need to make sure to set the pivot point. Now to copy, I can just open the properties of that peg, open the properties of this peg, and then I can copy paste the pivot information from here to there. There's also a really cool script from a company called Cartoon Flow, and you can find this on their website, where you can just copy the pivot information and paste it. Love that script. So let's say that we wanted to pose this, and we wanted to do some foreshortening. I'm going to push Alt down to bring this forward, right? And then I would want to scale that down. I will angle my camera so that it's easier to just quickly scale that. And I would probably just want it to look like this. And then that cuff, I can bring the cuff back. And then the wrist, and it is acting a little weird here, so I'm just going to move it all the way back and hide it. That's why you like to be able to have everything pegged separately, but also pegged in a way that works, is so that you can have that kind of thing with the foreshortening. Press undo a bunch of times, or I don't have to press undo. I can select everything, press R to reset it, and then reset the pivots. I reset the deformers. I think I want that wrist by default to be a little bit lower. I want this wrist to be a little bit lower. I'm going to choose Apply to Line and Color Art, and I'm going to choose Preview All Art Layers so I can see the line art and the color art at the same time. I'm going to press Ctrl A to select it all. Move this down. The wrist is here, and I need to update where the deformers are, because they did not move with it. So I'm going to solo the wrist again, and I'm going to choose the deformers. I'm going to show the deformers, and then I am going to enter into the rigging tool. This will allow me to permanently change where the deformers are, and then I'm in animation mode to test it out, and that looks good. Get out of solo mode. So as you can see right now, if I were to show the deformers, that cuff back part is right there, and so whenever I'm just rotating the cuff normally, it is rotating both of them, which is great. I usually don't want to see that. Only on special occasions do I want to see the back of that cuff. So what I want to do now is I just want to match the starting position of my reference. So this is great. If people get to a point where the arm is really funky and there's Z-depth all over the place, and if they press reset and then they reset all the deformers, it's going to come to this very usable straight arm. I want to go ahead and match it to the turnaround. What I want to do here is I actually want to see the pivot points, or the backup stuff, remember. I'm going to select the upper arm. I'm selecting the upper arm master peg where it's moving everything. I am going to rotate. I'm holding Alt and middle mouse. I'm just going to rotate this to where the magenta circle should be. And then I'm going to select the forearm master peg and rotate this to where it's putting the hand where it ought to be. And now I'm going to select both of those, and I am going to adjust the deformers to get that natural looking curve into the arm. And I think I had a little bit of a curve going on down here, just natural looking curve. So there, as you can see, I showed my selected deformers and it showed both this and the one behind it. And then once I selected one single point of this deform chain and showed them, show current deform chain, it only showed these. Now let's go ahead and turn off that invisible circle so it doesn't look all distracting. And now I want to go ahead and turn off the reference, because having that blurry semi-transparent reference is a little difficult to see how it looks. Alright, well, I think that looks pretty good. Rotate, it's looking great. Yeah, that looks nice. So this is the default arm that I always build first, is the two-piece arm.